One. Hello, welcome to the Jenkins Documentation Office Hours. Today is January 9th. Happy New Year. So the first session of the year. And around the table we have myself, Chris Stern, Bruno Vashton, and Soham Janija. Sorry if I butchered your last name, Soham. Hopefully that's not too bad. Meg was here. She may join back, and Mark may join up. We'll leave their names on the attendees, but if that changes or they aren't here, we'll take them off. So for the agenda today, some notes on Contributor Spotlight. Just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of the Jenkins Contributor Summit that's happening. Recent blog posts and upcoming blog posts on the Jenkins blog. Again, just want to share the election results. We only had one session in December, so just to rehash that quickly. We had our LTS release yesterday. The next LTS release to come. We had a few weeklies that have happened between our last session and the break. If Mark does show up, some discussion about Alpha Omega and what the project ideas for documentation might look like when it comes time to discuss with them. Some plugin developer documentation improvements, and this was previously started by Antoine Neveu. We'll see if Antoine joins us today so we can continue that. I want to highlight recent work done on Jenkins.io documentation. The Blue Ocean deprecation discussion can continue if we reach that point, but I put it at the end of the agenda just in case we don't get there. It's not the end of the world. Are there any other topics that we want to put on the agenda before we get started, or does that cover things for most folks? Great. So first off, the Contributor Spotlight. So we're still featuring James Nord. That was our last spotlight in December. So what we're going to be pivoting to now is other contributors, historical contributors. Our first spotlight of 2025 is going to be with Kosuke, which is really exciting. For anyone not aware, the founder and creator of Jenkins. So a lot of great backstory and a lot of, I already did an interview with him at the end of December. So we have a lot of great content that I'm really excited to put together and share. So that'll be nice to highlight. And then we just discussed this in advocacy and outreach, but I think we're going to start potentially reducing the cadence of publication of the spotlight instead of every 2 weeks, potentially going to once a month, just to give us a little bit more time to source spotlights. But also, so if we're going historically and there's more background or more insight and stories to share, we want to give them breadth and let them people have the chance to read through and get to those if they haven't gotten to them yet. But does anyone have any concerns or issues with potentially reducing the spotlight publication rate?
Not about that, but I do wonder, like, if we need to have any changes to the website, if we're going to spotlight other than people. Another format, like a new layout for it.
I don't think we necessarily go about changing the site layout or the design of the page. If that's something that, we decide it could be improved or changed at a later point in time, that might be something we visit down the line. But I'm happy with the contributor spotlight, the way it's already set up and the way it's presented. Others' opinions? Any?
So Chris, maybe you can expand further. I'm personally biased towards keeping the current layout just because I like the layout, but maybe I'm missing something that is on your mind.
Oh, because I was just taking historical spotlights a little bit too literally. So if we're going to like have other kinds of features, like if we're going to talk about a bit about like history of Jenkins, so we may want some layout that's a little bit different without like maybe more like a blog post than like a feature of a person.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so if we were reshaping it so that instead of being about a person, which the next one will be about the person Kosuke Kawaguchi, if it were instead about a look back at the history of Jenkins, that might be better suited to a blog post. Did I say that reasonably well, Chris, for what you were intending?
Yep, that's exactly it.
Great. Okay. So, and my mental model is let's keep it focused on individuals because there are still lots of individuals I think we should, and I'm not even sure we should set ourselves any limits on only do historical, because there are quite a number of contributors that haven't given us a spotlight, and I think with some prodding or gentle asking might be willing.
Okay.
And for my because I feel like I'm not pulling back the curtain enough here. So the topic and the idea of the historical view is more just sourcing other contributors from Jenkins and whether or not they're current or alumni, let's say. The idea was that maybe we can just, as a topic, not necessarily a change of design or anything like that. So yeah, so I think maybe I was a little unclear in what I was referring to in that. So sorry about that, my bad. But I totally agree that if we were going to do like a historical like a retrospective or a history of Jenkins, it would be a nice blog post to have something a little bit more long form, something that's not something that breaks the kind of confines of what the contributor spotlight would be, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So next up, we have the Jenkins Contributor Summit. So that's happening at the end of January, on January 31st, just before the FOSDEM conference in Brussels. We do have a full room, which is really exciting. Bruno has shared the agenda on the community discourse site. So you can go here, check it out, see what we're planning. And I've got to do some work to add my docs content to the agenda. Unfortunately, I won't be able to join this year. So I'll have to miss out, but I do have full intention to make sure the docs update is there. Any notes on Contributor Summit before we move on? No, okay.
So Bruno, let me angle. I think Bruno is willing to hear agenda suggestions. At least I know I'm going to boldly have some suggestions that he and I will discuss tomorrow. So I don't think that the agenda is finalized, at least not in my assumption. And we're going to keep working on it and preparing for it. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a great summit.
Yeah, the paint is still wet on the agenda. You can still put your fingerprints in it if you feel like it.
Got it. Updated accordingly. It's a work in progress, though. But plenty of time left before that. So yeah, thank you very much, both Mark and Bruno. Next up, so Google Summer of Code Call for Mentors was a blog post published back in the middle of December, just before the break. The project's doing a great job of sourcing mentors. We've got a good number of mentors, and there's a lot of excitement and a lot of interest based on the Gitter channel activity, which is great. Can always use more mentors. There's no limit to that. And Google has not yet announced Google Summer of Code yet, so we're still waiting on their lead for when and what that's going to be. But lots of interest and lots of activity and excitement from potential contributors is really good to have.
So I had a question to Chris and Bruno. I assume that Google has not announced any more details of the 2025 program yet.
Not yet.
Is that correct?
Yeah, Alisa got in touch with the representative of GSOC and hasn't heard back from them. But there is still hope. They are organizing in Europe some parties regarding GSOC. So during FOSDEM on the Saturday night, there is a party organized by Google and GSOC. So there is hope that they know this will happen. Yeah, it's just postponed and not canceled. At least that's the way I envision it, because I'm optimistic. I think it will happen. The thing is, we can start before the official GSOC, because it would be a mini drama having to stop if Google were to say we are not doing GSOC this year. So yeah, better be prudent, better safe than sorry. Chris, what's your insight?
I'm kind of worried because I've heard rumors about GSOC canceling more and more of their programs. Like, for example, before they cancel some of them, I think competitions, and now GSOC, I'm not sure because it may be the last one standing, so not looking good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, Bruno, for the insight.
Now, but they are hosting an event at FOSDEM, right? So there's at least something happening at FOSDEM related to it.
maybe to celebrate the end of the GSOC program. You never know.
Okay.
Because like they sent an email earlier to the mentors and admins, and they told us like there's no news yet, but hopefully there will be some news in January, but not sure.
Maybe it turns into a kickoff announcement at FOSDEM. Hope, fingers crossed. But okay. Well, thank you for the insights. We'll definitely keep an eye on things there. There is one project idea specifically around the build retooling of Jenkins.io. Just to give some background, this is a continuation from a project that was part of Google Summer of Code last year, headed by Chris and Bruno. So that was really great to have. There's a lot of work done. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. This year, if everything does go on, I will be one of the co-mentors for the project. But the idea is that the end of the project or the result of the project would be the version doc site for Jenkins.io. It would be a new updated design of the site and provide documentation that would allow a lot more leniency with what version you're using and what information you're seeing. Right now, because it's just one amalgamation of documentation, there is it's one piece as opposed to having separate documentation for each version or at least the supported LTS versions, for instance. So more to come on that. We'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully we'll have news soon on what's going on with Google Summer of Code. Next up is the 2 upcoming blog posts. So we have the 2024 recap. We want to highlight all the wins, successes, and great stuff from 2024 in the Jenkins project. So it has been created. We're waiting right now to have the governance board review and approve some of the content, mostly the sponsor images, because the sponsors are currently put into some tiers following the CDF sponsor page, but we want to make sure that everything is in the appropriate place and the right tier, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to meet with the governance board. The next governance board meeting is Monday, and hopefully we can have that conversation, start before then, but ultimately have it at least mostly determined by that point. That way we can get this out.
I started the conversation already. I asked the board for approval of the ordering, and I actually gave some numbers to try to set precise boundaries, set some boundaries on those levels. So, and I think I've got a response from one board member so far, not more than that. So if we don't get more responses, I'll ask them in the board meeting on Monday.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate the legwork on that, and appreciate you getting the conversation started with the board. And then I just want to say thank you to Roxanne from CDF for creating the sponsor image and the section headers in the blog post. So Roxanne always is very on board and does great work. So thanks to her for that. If you have a chance to review it, please let me know if there's anything that might be missing or that should be highlighted. I went through the blog posts, tweets, social media highlights that we have done over the last year to get the information from that. But if there's something that I may have missed or something that wasn't already highlighted that we want to call out, definitely share that feedback within the pull request so we can get that content in there. And then the last upcoming blog post, and this will be published tomorrow, provided there's no issues, but the announcement of the Jenkins Design Library 3. And so this is coming from Jan Faracek, and I'm sure others in terms of the work that it took to get this ready and into production. So thanks to Jan, thanks to Tim Jacome, thanks to everyone that has done their work on this. Jan put together a really nice blog post explaining what that means for users and what to expect with that. So looks really good, and I'm sure this will be a very welcome change for users. Next up, so just again to rehash Jenkins elections. So the results were announced back at the beginning of January. Valentin Delay and Alex Earl have been added to the governance board, and Alexander Brandes is returning to the governance board. So welcome and welcome back to them respectively. All the officers will remain in their roles and continue for another term. And thank you to all of the participants voting, nominations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The process wouldn't have happened without everyone's team effort. And then yesterday we had our most recent LTS 2.479.3 released. That went well. Changelog and upgrade guide is available on the site as well. Nothing too insane to note here. There were some regressions that were addressed and a couple other items that were backported a little bit later, but we got them into the changelog, so everything is available as expected. And then the next LTS is scheduled to be released on February 6, 2025. Currently, the baseline discussion is looking towards 2.492 as it contains some backports and fixes that would have had to have been incorporated into the LTS separately if we use 2.491. So right now, the consensus appears to be 2.492. And I'm going to start compiling the changelog and upgrade guide over the next week to make sure that that's ready to go.
I got a question though. It's more to confirm the date. When do we know for sure about the next LTS baseline?
So I think it's already known. We'll just go with that number, 2.492. I'll send a reply to the list saying I'm given that 2.492 had no objections. Have Tim Jacome confirm it. In terms of a release lead, I'd actually like to have somebody take the release lead from inside CloudBees, if you're okay with that, Chris, just because you've been so kind to do release lead multiple times. We'd like to take our share of the responsibility for one or two releases.
Yeah, because I was going to send out the email, but I don't know which version to mention. That's why.
Yeah, so just go ahead and mention 492. That's great. Let's get the invitation out, and then I can have some conversations. If you'll delay, don't say I, Chris Stern, volunteer, because I want to see if I can find somebody else to volunteer since you've done the last two.
Okay, sure.
Chris, you deserve a break as much as anyone else when it comes to this stuff. So yeah. So that's coming up. I'm going to start, like I said, working on the changelog and upgrade guide over the next week or so, and have that together before it's too close to that. And then between our last session and today, weeklies 2.490, 2.491, and 2.492 have all been released. 2.491 was done off schedule right before the 2-week break to revert a regression that was introduced in 2.490. So thanks to everyone who made that possible and was able to help get that released. Great work by the infra team and everyone else involved. And then the next topic is the Alpha Omega documentation project ideas. So the long and short, we've been working with Alpha and Omega on the content security policy over the last 3 months. The time has come again to talk with them about potential project ideas this year. Mark, do you want to take the lead on this one? I know that a lot of this is the documentation topics, but the specifics of it maybe?
Yeah, so what I suggested to Alpha Omega, and I'm embarrassed to admit I only suggested it last Sunday, so I was delayed 2 weeks in my holiday celebrations. So what I suggested was we proposed to create multiple tutorials or documentation pages using some specific security tools based on tutorials created by Darren Pope initially. He's created 2 of them already, but we would turn those into a variant of them that would be actual written documentation. And the proposal was to see if we could have Meg McRoberts act as our contracted person. Meg, you and I have got to talk because I didn't list any price for your contracting time, but I assumed a 3-month project. I still haven't received a response from them. I'll ping them today to see if they're interested.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's pretty easy. It sounds fun, and it sounds like a really good thing to add. Be fun.
I think it certainly is interesting to Alpha Omega, and the question then is, are they interested in things focused on end users, or do they want to instead keep their focus intensely on projects and maintainers of projects, source maintainers, and I don't know which of those, or if they say, oh, we're interested in both, great. If it's only focused on maintainers, then this is probably a poor choice for their choosing.
Yeah.
That's all I had, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Mark. Megan, any thoughts, opinions? And then, Mark, updating the maintainer tutorial that we had discussed previously, was that updating it or creating a new maintainer tutorial for security?
Concept there is creating a new one, because the existing tutorial, Improve a Plugin, is not for maintainers, it's for anyone, and specifically scoped to allow a non-maintainer to still make a useful contribution. But maintainers have a different set of questions, a different set of permissions, and a different set of responsibilities. And because of all those differences, the Improve a Plugin tutorial is the wrong place to talk to maintainers. Right? That's why I think we really should have a separate maintainers, and it may just be sections in the developer guide. I don't yet know. It's just the tutorial format worked so well for us with Improve a Plugin that I'm prone to use something similar for the developer choices.
That's fair. I think it's a great idea, and I think it actually kind of bleeds into the plugin developer documentation topic that Antoine had started a while ago with us. That being the plugin development documentation has a lot of work in progress and gaps in information and knowledge that we could implement. Obviously, we need someone to be able to share that knowledge with us so that we can incorporate it into the documentation. But providing a maintainer tutorial, how to incorporate security measures, how to maintain a plugin, how to maintain a plugin within the ecosystem itself. There's a lot of good content that could be had there that would address that concern and address that question, while also being, if we wanted to take the angle of why Alpha and Omega should be interested in it, that would play right into that as well. So I think that would be a really great opportunity. Whether Alpha and Omega agrees to it, that's up to them. But that sort of information, that sort of security documentation would be very valuable to developers of plugins. And yeah, so. Great. And again, Antoine's not here with us today, so I would love to pick his brain more about what kind of opportunities he might have in mind, or if he has any specific examples that he would love to see improved upon, but we'll, in due time.
Well, so Kevin, we can look really quickly, very fast overview. If you open a new page, jenkins.io/doc/developer, and there's already a visual cue on the left-hand side. Notice the little triangles there next to each of those items. Those are the work in progress indicators. And part of me says, well, the architecture one, if you click through it, it's actually got some content that maybe we should just remove the work in progress from it.
That's fair too. And similarly with, I think, the extensibility one has a good amount of information too. It might not. I think that's the work in progress is sort of a misnomer in this case, because of course there's always work in progress, but where there is content, where it is available, it seems a little unnecessary to have this sort of thing.
Right. And so handling requests has 5 sections underneath it, but is still listed as a work in progress. It may just be that work in progress is not a helpful concept in this case.
And it seems like the work in progress is specifically for this index page, which is not what it should be used for. If these pages were empty, that'd be one thing, but where the content is there, like this one having, but that doesn't have, oh, maybe it's because of that. I don't know. So yeah, things to check out. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Things to check out, but, it's a great topic. I appreciate Antoine for bringing it up into the forefront. I think it's something that's going to take a little bit more time and a little bit more expertise to handle. So,
Right. Yep.
great. Anything else on those topics, Mark, or anyone else?
Nothing else for me there.
Okay. So then the next thing I wanted to highlight was some recent work done on Jenkins.io. So there's a bunch of different stuff that's been happening in the last couple weeks. First thing I wanted to do is just thank Stefan Merle for fixing the issue where the deploy preview was broken for Jenkins.io pull requests. This was actually raised by another contributor who was working on a documentation request, Biru. So thanks to Biru for pointing that out. I didn't realize it until he had said something. And thanks to Stefan again for bringing the Ruby up to speed and getting everything working again on the deploy preview. It helps a lot with reviewing pull requests, of course. So very valuable. Mark went ahead and updated the platform SIG content so that everything is a lot more up to date. Stuff like making sure that we're talking about what Java version we support, and the fact that some of the projects and implementations that were there before have either been completed or no longer relevant to the content on the page. So thank you very much, Mark, for that update. Stefan Speaker, longtime contributor, wonderful person, added some documentation about the file path within Jenkins developer documentation and was able to also remove the work in progress status on that page. So just like we were talking about, the content's there. It's a great reason to remove the work in progress status. Chris has been going through and updating Google Summer of Code documentation, whether it's the general GSOC information, the project ideas pages, anything that they can get their hands on. Chris is on top of that. So thanks always to Chris for their resilience and their due diligence on this. Excuse me. In addition to that, Valentin Delay added the plugin modernizer tool project idea to the Google Summer of Code 2025 project ideas. So another thing to have available for contributors if they are interested in that. Great. Again, we're in limbo with Google Summer of Code for the time being, but hopefully we have some news and this becomes something even better. And then something that was brought up recently with the packaging information and the Linux installation instructions. We've adjusted a couple things there. The packaging site now actually directs to the Linux installation docs on Jenkins.io. And this pull request was Mark updating things like the titles, the proper titles of Red Hat Enterprise Linux and not just Red Hat. There is a differentiation there. So just some nice updates here that help make the documentation a lot more clear and navigatable, and just correcting things that needed correction, stuff like Alma Linux being one and not two. So again, thank you very much, Mark, for those updates. Appreciate that. And then this contributor made sure realized that the plugin POM requires Maven 3.9.6, so they went and updated the documentation in the developer guide to reflect that. So thank you very, very much to I think it's Callie for their update there. That's great to have, and it's nice to see an external contributor providing that sort of update. Something that might go missed on my part because I'm not necessarily working on the plugin BOM, but someone else caught it, and that's the community effort right there. So amazing. And then again, for the Blue Ocean deprecation, this is something that's looking towards the future. We don't have to discuss it right now. We are almost out of time for today, so I don't want to get started on this right away or right now. We can definitely save it for next time. So that got through the agenda that I had planned for today. Does anyone have any other topics or things they want to discuss before we stop the recording for today? Nope. All right. Well, in that case, so I will stop the recording. It'll be available in about 24 to 48 hours on community discourse and YouTube. So it'll be available to watch at any point in time later. And until next time, before we wrap up completely, this is the only Doc's office hours for anyone that did not join us last time or is unaware. The Doc's office hours later session intended for Asia is no longer on the schedule. So if you are interested in Doc's office hours or Doc's related topics, come to this one. It is on the community events calendar and available for everyone along with the meeting link, and it gets posted in the Gitter channel prior to the meeting started. So on that note, thanks everyone as always. Happy New Year. Welcome back. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.